Hello, my name is Hernan Diaz, and I'm going to present an elite artificial B-colony algorithm for makespan optimization in JobShop with interval uncertainty. Scheduling problems are well-known non-deterministic polynomial time hard problems. They have many applications in real life, and in this case, intervals will help us to deal with real-world uncertainty. The objective of this work is to design an effective methods for solving the interval JobShop scheduling problem. Here we have the outline of the presentation. I will introduce the JobShop scheduling problem and the variant that we consider with interval uncertainty. After that, I will elaborate on the proposed solution, the result of the experiments, and the conclusions. The JobShop scheduling problem is a classical problem where we have a set of jobs, and each job has a series of tasks that must run sequentially one after the other. On top of this, each task is assigned to a different machine that is represented here by the color, and these tasks cannot overlap in the machine. Once that one task is running, it cannot be interrupted, and you have here a more formal description of the problem. To get a feasible solution, we need to assign a starting time to each operation, in a way that the completion time is the starting time plus the duration. So if we have a look to the Gantt chart of the schedule, it will be something like this, right, where we have all the tasks represented here, and the objective is to minimize the makespan, which is the maximum completion time of any task in the system, right? So as you can see here, the makespan is a crisp number, which is 12 for this instance. Well, classical JSP assumes a complete knowledge about the processing times, but the real world is full of uncertainty. The interval JobShop is a variant of the classical JSP in which uncertainty is modeled through intervals. So for instance, if an electrician or a plumber is coming to your house tomorrow, probably he will tell you that he will come from 6 to 8. And you could model this as an interval of time, right? So it could look something like this. This is the notation that we are using, A underscore for the left endpoint or the left leg of the interval, and A over score for the right endpoint or the right leg of the interval. Now, to work with intervals, we need to define operations like the addition of intervals, the maximum of intervals, the expected value of an interval, which is the middle point of the interval in this case. And an additional problem is that we don't have natural order when we are working with intervals, right? It's not easy to say if one interval is better than other or which one is the lower. So we need to define interval ranking methods. In the case of this work, we are using the midpoint, which is the middle point of the interval, because we want to compare with the state of the art, and the state of the art is using also this ranking method. In this case, for this example, as you can see, we have two intervals, 2,4 and 1,6, and the middle point of 2,4, which is 3, is smaller than the middle point of 1,6. So in this case, for our algorithm, the interval A will be better than the interval B because it has a smaller midpoint. The objective will be to minimize the makespan, so subject to the same restrictions as in the classical problem. But now the makespan looks a bit different. If we have a look to the representation of one task, we can see how it is some kind of trapeze where the left side represents the starting time of this task, which is an interval, and the right side represents the completion time of the task, which is also an interval. And these two sides don't have to be parallel. Now, if we see the Gantt chart representation, it will look something like this. And the most important is that the makespan is also an interval, and the left endpoint and the right endpoint don't have to belong to the same task, because the right endpoint is the maximum of all the right endpoints in the system, and the left endpoint is the maximum of all the left endpoints in the system. Now, last definition is the robustness. A robust schedule is the one that minimizes the effect of executional uncertainties on its performance. So this means that we measure the relative error based by the expected makespan or the predictive makespan, that is the one that we are getting as a solution from the algorithm, with respect to the makespan of the executed X schedule. So what we do to get this makespan is we run the schedules through a series of scenarios where we assign a real crisp value to the duration of each task that is within its interval. So at the end, we have this relative error that has to be lower or equal than epsilon, and the robustness is better if we have a robustness as low as possible. Okay, so now let's look into the artificial bee colony algorithm. Here we have a flow chart about what is happening in this algorithm. First, we have a step of initialization of parameters. We have to take into account that each solution is encoded with permutations with repetitions, and it is decoded with an insertion strategy, which means that each task is inserted at its earliest feasible time. The solutions are, let's say, that are viewed as food sources here, and the amount of nectar represents the makespan. So the bees will look for food sources with higher amount of nectar, which means a lower makespan. So once, if the termination criteria is not satisfied, which is 25 iterations without improving the best solution here, we enter in a loop where we have three different phases, right? The first one is the employed bee phase, where the bees put on this worker hat. The second phase is the onlooker bee phase, where the bees put these huge magnifiers on to look around. And the third phase is the scout bee phase, where the looks put the explorer hat on. At the end of each of these phases, we memorize the best food source, which is assigned to the hive queen. Right, so we need to take into account that the artificial bee colony is a bio-inspired swarm metaheuristic for optimization based on the foraging behavior of honeybees, firstly introduced by Karaboga in 2005. Once the determination criteria is satisfied, the best solution so far is returned by the algorithm. So let's have a look in detail to each one of these phases, right? So let's start by the employed bee phase. In the employed bee phase, each food source is assigned to one employed bee that explores a new candidate with a recombination strategy. The recombination operators are three operators that are adapted from the classical JSP problem, and they allow to recombine each food source with, well, we have different strategies for this, but let's say that in the first strategy, we recombine always with the best solution, right? With the one belonging to the hive queen. If the candidate that is found by the bees is better, it will replace their current food source, and otherwise we increase the number of trials in the food source. So let's go to the second phase, which is the onlooker bee phase. In this case, each onlooker bee is assigned to a food source and then tries to find a better neighboring one. So we need to define a neighborhood strategy. In this case, the bees will look around only of their food source, and the neighborhood operators that we have, inversion, insertion, or swap, also classical neighboring operators. In this case, if the candidate found this better, it will replace the original food source, and otherwise we increase the number of trials in one. And in the third phase, the scout bee phase, we check the number of improvement trials on each food source, and if it reaches a maximum, the scout bee will find a new random food source, a new random solution to replace the previous one. Okay, so let's talk a bit again about the employed bee phase, about the recombination strategy. We have talked about Elite 1, which is where each food source is recombined with the best food source. This is, let's say, what is found in the classical literature, and it has a problem of that is very intensive in exploitation. So it has a bit of premature convergence. To improve this and apport more exploration, more diversity to the algorithm, we propose two different strategies. The first one, which is Elite 2, consists on crossing the food source belonging to the employed bees with the food source with the highest number of improvement trials and the highest nectar amount. So, I mean, as this food source is good enough because it has to be, I mean, it has been tried to improve several times, and it changes more often than the best food source. We are getting more diversity and more balance between exploration and exploitation here. And the third approach is Elite 3, where the elite group contains the best end food source in the current swarm. And a solution from this group is chosen at random to guide the employed B. The advantage of Elite 3 is that we have an extra parameter, which is the number of food sources that we have in the Elite group, and this helps to balance a lot exploration and exploitation. If N is 1, it means that we are crossing always with, we are recombining always with the best food source, like in Elite 1. But if we increase the size of this group, we are adding more and more diversity, and we can control this in the parameter setup. Okay, so this is the final configuration, the parameter setup. We have made one for each variant of the algorithm, and as you can see, the elite size is 50 in the case of Elite 3, so it's adding more diversity to the algorithm. So now let's see the results of the experiment. In the first part, we compare the performance of ABC with the state of the art, and at IEASP with makespan minimization. We use the 12 interval instances used by us in 2020. We use the midpoint as ranking operator because this is what was used at the state of the art. And we have 25 consecutive iterations without improvement as a stopping criterion. We make 30 runs, for instance. So as you can see, the best results are highlighted in blue here, and we are obtaining the best results in Elite 2 and Elite 3. We have here also the lower bounds of the problem that are taken from the CRISP instances. And a part of this, if we take the average results, it happens the same. Elite 2 and Elite 3 are offering the best average. And the statistical tests that we have run on the results conclude that Elite 2 and Elite 3 are very similar statistically speaking, right? While Elite 1 is more similar to the genetic algorithm that was considered the state of the art. Well, a part of this, if we look into the relative error relative to the lower bound, we can see how we are decreasing this error from the genetic algorithm, which is represented as the orange bar here. We are decreasing this error in the best solution around 37%. So as you can see, the blue bar is around 1/3 lower than the orange bar. And we are also reducing this error in the best solution in around 35%, right? So it's a good reduction on the error relative to the lower bound. If we see a graph displaying the convergence of the different versions of the algorithms along time, we can see how, as I mentioned before, Elite 1 plummets really quickly here. The genetic algorithm is represented in black. And well, as you can see, the convergence of Elite 2 and Elite 3 is more smoother, right, than the one of Elite 1 and the genetic algorithm. And they managed to achieve a better final results. On top of this, if we cut the convergence at any given point in time, Elite 3 and Elite 1 are still offering better results than the genetic algorithm. But Elite 2 is very similar here for this instance. But the longer convergence of these versions allow them to achieve better final results, which later will be helpful if we want to implement features like local search in this algorithm, in these versions that focuses a lot on exploitation, right? So it will combine better with Elite 2 and Elite 3 than with the other algorithms. Okay, and in the second stage, we compare the robustness of the different ABC versions, and we conclude that the robustness is very low, and the statistical tests say that it's also similar statistically. So we don't disregard robustness in favor of getting better solutions, but we keep also the quality of the solutions in the three versions of the algorithm. So to conclude, I will say that, well, this is a second approach to solve the IEASP using ABC. ABC is competitive with the existing interval methods. We are able to improve the results of the genetic algorithm to reduce the relative error in 1/3. Elite ABC improves the original variant, especially Elite 3, which is achieving not only better results, but it has an extra parameter that allows us to balance the difference between, to model the balance between exploration and exploitation in the algorithm, and the robustness of the solutions is not compromised. Further work, we want to implement more powerful search methods, as I said before, as local search, hill climbing, taboo search that we are already having good results with this because we are working on it. We want to include some designs to increase the diversity even more in the algorithm. And we want to analyze the influence of different ranking methods that take into account different properties of the intervals and see how these interval ranking methods have an effect on the final results of the algorithms. So I think that that's all. Thank you very much for having me here today. I will leave you my email and my LinkedIn profile. Feel free to add me to your networks. And thank you very much for listening to this presentation.